This has been one heartbreaking week to witness and for all of us across the world. People in Israel mourning their dead with children killed at point-blank range in their crib. People in Gaza are suffering with blockade and bombardments, lack of essential supplies. And spare a thought for those who are still in captivity of Hamas terrorists even now, women, men and babies. While the Western world and the Arab world are witnessing divisions of opinions, India has reiterated its position on Israel-Palestine conflict.
India has always advocated the resumption of direct negotiations towards establishing a sovereign, independent and viable state of Palestine, living within secure and recognized borders, side by side, at peace with Israel.
This has been India's consistent stand for decades now. That is the two-state solution. And that stand remains unchanged. How has India been with Israel and Palestine? A background for you. In 1974, India became the first non-Arab state to recognize Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO, as the sole and legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. In 1988, India became one of the first countries to recognize the Palestinian state. By 1996, it opened a representative office in Gaza, later shifting it to Ramallah in 2003. India announced recognition of Israel in 1950, and soon thereafter the Jewish Agency established an immigration office in then Bombay. Embassies were opened in 1992 when full diplomatic relations were established. So India maintains a relationship with both Palestine and Israel. But the incident of 7th October 2023 has generated a lot of buzz over the internet. Many Indians are writing their opinions on social media. Many are in support of Israel, as we understand jihadist terrorism which India has suffered, backed by Pakistan in Kashmir, or 26/11, where many Indians, irrespective of their ideologies, nationalities or ethnicities, were shot dead. But many Indians are also pointing out that innocent Palestinians have for long suffered with attacks and blockade by Israel. But thankfully, the streets of India are in peace. Indians have chosen not to create chaos and mess on the roads like we see in other parts of the world as I speak. And I hope this peace prevails. After Hamas leader called for Muslims across the world to join hands, hinting at possible attacks, police has been seen patrolling sensitive areas of the national capital, Delhi. But I'm proud to say that Indian citizens have shown maturity in such a sensitive developing situation, despite very strong opinions clearly on this issue. And I hope that this peace prevails. Listen now to what Fareed Zakaria, who's a well-known TV anchor and author, said about India maintaining its objectivity.
I think broadly speaking, the Indian response has been correct, which is to strike a balance between very strongly being against terror, sympathizing with Israel as having gone through this horrible terror attack, and yet reminding people that India supports the Palestinian cause, supports the idea of a Palestinian state. That seems to me the rational position for India. Look, on this particular issue, I don't think India has any particular need to get more deeply involved. But on the broader issue of where it stands in the world, with the forces of order, United States, Western Europe, Japan, or does it stand with the world of disorder, Russia, Iran? That's where I think it has to make some bigger and broader strategic decisions.
But look what is unfolding in the Western world between cops and pro-Palestine and sadly also pro-Hamas supporters. That's right, there has been sloganeering against Jews outside the Sydney Opera House in Australia. Situation in fact turned messy in Paris, where cops clashed with protesters because France has banned pro-Palestine protests that were turning into pro-Hamas protests. France has actually expressed a joint statement in support of Israel for the right to defend itself. And this has been the stand of at least 5 nations in the Western world. Even in Britain, skirmishes were reported. 2 Jewish schools in North London shut for the day in the interest of the safety of our precious children. They said this in the background of threats by the Hamas leaders and some of the ongoing protests. Sadly, a video is going viral in London. Grieving members of the Jewish community put up posters of those kidnapped and still in Hamas captivity. But these women were seen tearing those posters down. And they asked, what about Palestine?
It's children, it's innocent people.
Okay, what about the children in Palestine?
Germany and Austria, meanwhile, have also banned any support of Hamas terror organization and also ensured no pro-Palestinian protests are allowed. This is in the backdrop of Hamas threatening the Friday violence and with slogans like "from river to the sea," and that could lead to law and order situation. This was Vienna, protesters aggressively pushing away even the cops where the protests were not being permitted. But not just streets. Western universities have also got caught up in the grip of solidarity rallies, shouting Intifada in American universities for Palestine and solidarity rallies for Israel since the massacre. On the ground in the Middle East, meanwhile, Hezbollah has threatened to attack northern Israel. Hezbollah is believed to be backed by Iran. Also, Syria state media is reporting that the country's airports in Damascus and Aleppo have been targeted by Israel's missiles, which means runways have been damaged and flights will be diverted to another Syrian city. This means this could not be just between Israel and the Gaza Strip and Hamas anymore, but could open other borders of attacks against Israel that Israel is also already threatening with. Now let's talk about the Gaza Strip. Israel claims it is attacking the terror hideouts and these are retaliatory strikes. It has sent out warnings for Palestinians in specific areas to evacuate those places. Possibly that a sign of a ground assault or further strikes by Israel. But the ground situation, when we look at it, does look terrifying. So many women, men, and children in the Gaza Strip are seen injured and dead. These are heartbreaking images to see the scenes that are unfolding of bloodshed, the ghost town of Gaza Strip. Remember, these people cannot leave the area because on one side they are surrounded by Israel largely and there is Egypt on another, and Egypt border has also been closed with the Gaza Strip. In attacking what Israel claims are terror hideouts, it is very clear that innocent civilians are dying or severely injured, even if the terrorists have used these civilian areas. The question is, how can this be justified either? This is while electricity and supplies have been snapped by Israel, essential services will suffer, like in hospitals, medical aid, and just basic life. The fact is, this war needs to stop. Gaza's health ministry on 12th October had said over 1,500 Palestinians, including possibly 500 children and 276 women, have been killed and more than 6,000 others have been wounded in the Israeli airstrikes on the blockaded enclave. The bloodshed is for all to see with the visuals coming in. And all of this while Hamas's top leadership enjoys hospitality of Qatar while claiming to fight for the Palestinians. Watching all this unfold, Indians have realized the relative peace that we have today in our part of the world vis-a-vis the Middle East. We take for granted sometimes that our security systems have managed to keep attacks at bay, and our politicians have been pushing more for diplomacy and negotiations with other countries. And importantly, despite pressure from the Western world, like during the Russia-Ukraine war, to take a side, not opting to go for it and take an independent stand. Because the fact is, why should India involve itself in someone else's conflict that does not have anything to do with India really? India, and giving this statement by the Ministry of External Affairs, maintains universal obligation to observe humanitarian law. So as we fight the menace of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations, let us also remember, as I conclude, to be humane, to remember innocent people are suffering, and to know that we are all eventually one world. Thank you for watching.
That's an 85-year-old lady being kidnapped by Hamas militants. Hamas gunmen killed 1,200 Israelis, mostly civilians, and took about 150 hostages.
I mean, you have to be a special sort of person to take an 85-year-old woman out of her bed, don't you? She really, these are frail people. When the videos first surfaced, there was a video of a very elderly woman on a kind of rickshaw being taken around Gaza in her 90. And I looked at it and I thought, oh my God, I don't know this woman. She's from another kibbutz, She's not someone I know. Only, of course, she was my mother's friend.
And these are Gazans in search for survivors under rubble of collapsed buildings.
مربع الدمر كله هيته ولا حاجه دمار على احياء ابرياء ايش بدك اكثر من هيك وبرغم ذلك صامدين.
With the current conflict raging on and casualties on both the sides, the total death toll currently stands at around 2,800. That means 2,800 people, mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, no longer there. Each casualty represents a family shattered, dreams unfulfilled, and community left grieving. In Israel, Hamas militants went door to door killing civilians. They massacred young people at a music festival, and the shocking image of infants being massacred is beyond belief. On the other hand, after Israeli airstrikes, morgues at Gaza's biggest hospital is overflowing. Workers had to stack corpses, some in the parking lot, some were placed in a tent, and others were sprawled on cement under the sun. Israel is preparing for a possible ground invasion of Gaza for the first time in nearly a decade, and that's likely to drive up the Palestinian death toll. Women and children are the worst hit in the conflict, making more than 60% of those affected. The UN Humanitarian Office said that more than 4 lakh people had fled their homes in the Gaza Strip. The loss of life is perhaps the most tragic consequence of any conflict. So no matter who wins, it's ultimately the people who lose. That's all that we have for you today. Thank you for watching.
For more informative videos like this, keep watching India Today Newsmo.